everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Tech.Strong.Women, where we feature amazing women doing amazing things in tech. I'm Jody Ashley, executive producer here at Tech.Strong. I'm here with creator and CEO of Deploy Hub. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to give you a quick update about what's happening here at Tech.Strong. Be sure to register for Tech.Strong.Con 2024. Speaker submissions are still open, and we always love sponsors. And if you're attending KubeCon in Paris on March 19th through the 22nd, Tech.Strong will be live streaming interviews from the event all week. So be sure and stop by our booth and say hello. You can register for all of our events by going to techstrongevents.com, and be sure to tune in every day to techstrong.tv for great shows and interviews. Okay, Tracy, what's on your mind today?
Gender equality and pay. So there was an article sent to me via email. I didn't discover this. I was shocked by it, though. A company by the name of Design Rush did some gender gap pay analysis based on government records and other critical information. So it looks like it's pretty real. Let's just say it that way. And most women stop getting paid by November 20th nationwide because of that gender gap. So that means that men are still continuing to be paid, and that's how much more that they are making than women, which is horrendous. And what really annoyed me the most was that there are, I'm just going to call them out, North Carolina, Utah, and California, three primary areas where there's good investment and tech startups. They were on the top 10 of the worst cases. If you look at the case of North Carolina, Utah, and California, they're around 75% of, they're paying women 75% of what men make, which means, ladies, if you work in one of those states, you don't get paid for the last quarter, not November 20th, but the full last quarter of the year. So the last 3 months, you're not getting paid, the guys are. This is like really bad. It's time that this stuff is being called out, and women need to start complaining about it. And it should be the opposite. Women are such hard workers and so dedicated that we should be seeing women in tech in particular being encouraged to get into this industry and being paid at least 5 or 10% better than the men, in my opinion. So speak up. We need to use our voice on this one. It's not right. It really is not right. And kudos to some of the states who are at almost 100%. South Dakota, Idaho, and Connecticut are the top three. Now, that may be because the pay in those states are lower anyway, and so it's more averaged. But in states like California, where there is so much investment and so much money, it's horrible to think that women are making about 79% of what men do in California, especially when they're always bragging about, how liberal and how diverse they are. It's terrible. It's really terrible. So that's what my bugaboo is today.
Well, that is a good bugaboo. Thank you for bringing that up and talking about it. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. She is a fellow Coloradian, and her name is Shannon Mason. Hi, Shannon. Thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Jody. Nice to be here. And hi, Tracy. And what a bugaboo. And even more aggravating when we also factor in those folks that are from diverse populations, because I think it's like then we're losing like a quarter and a half or sometimes even a half year. It's a pain. It's a pain we need to solve, and definitely something that I'm passionate about, which is why I keep receipts. You got to shout your successes from the rooftops, and definitely take credit where you've been doing good work. But that's not what you asked me, Jody. You asked me a little bit about me. So yes, I'm here in Colorado. I love it. Beautiful state. Can't cross over the border and move here, which I did 2 decades ago, without loving being outside. But in my not outside activities, I run strategy for Tempo Software, which is product portfolio managed by PE. So we can potentially get into that today, what that looks like. And I'm focused specifically on expanding where we're going, both from our GTM perspective and then also from a product lines perspective. In my previous lives, I've taught pre-K and kindergarten. My background's in child developmental psychology and applied social neuroscience. Ran a product for a little company here that's a little bit of a startup darling that went public and then got bought by CA called Rally Software. Worked at GitHub as well too. So been very deeply involved in the Colorado tech scene since moving here, but there is this weird, wild, varied life that existed before that, which includes traveling while I was working at the United Nations and a bunch of other things. So stoked to talk about whatever we're going to talk about today, because I know we can talk about a lot of different things. But yeah, nice to see you all.
Well, when we look at your resume, you are a rock star in the technology business, and I hope to goodness that you get paid more than the man that you work with, because I think you deserve it. You have a very interesting background, and you've done some really. I mean, you've been playing hardball in the tech business for some time, and it's not easy to do that when you're in a male-dominated world. So. Kudos to you, especially, we have we have some similar background. I have done business with CA, and I continue to do business with Broadcom, a little company that we created in 1995 called OpenMake Software. And they still resell our software to this day after all these years. So I always liked CA. I always did.
Definitely a good place. Great learning experience for me is the spot where I got to move into product leadership and a really fast learning in what that looks like, especially in a publicly traded environment, which is totally different from VC, even different from PE. And so that was a fun time that I had there. And Raleigh was especially a unique place to be, and a unique time to be there as well too. So I owe a lot of my learning from the tech side to that time.
Yeah, I remember the CA world after Rally got bought, and it was huge. It was like, oh my goodness, all the Rally people are here. They showed up. So, the thing about it is that it's not that you've just been in those roles. You've been in high level positions in those roles. Give us some insights on how you worked your way up the ladder. You've achieved some really high level successes in your career. What is your secret?
I'm always looking to learn. So I will probably bring up quite a bit of the time that I spent at Rally, because it was a good chunk of time that I was there, and I got to do a lot of different things. Usually every couple of years there was something new and interesting that I could do. The big thing for me is I really believe in organizations that have that mentality to get the right people on the bus and they'll find their seat. And then as the bus gets bigger, you might need to be changing seats. And so even with folks that I work with now, especially if they're looking for new jobs or looking to transition or to find something new, even within the organization that they're working within, it's that question that I like to ask, even ask myself is, where's the U-shaped hole in the organization? Go find it and fill that hole. And then if there's anybody in the organization that ever taps you and says, hey, I think you might be good at this, rather than having that reaction that's like, oh, but that's not what I do, or that's not what I've been thinking I should do, is to go chase that thread. So a lot of my background has been around chasing different interesting threads, like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to go learn more about that. Oh, gosh, now it's my job. Even here at Tempo, when I started, I was looking at our diversification path. So a lot of the work that we do is in the Atlassian ecosystem and supporting organizations with different applications to enhance and supercharge their use of Jira. And so I was kind of interested in that, but I was focused on a completely different area. And I think within 4 months, I ended up becoming our CPO and taking over our entire product direction, product vision, and our M&A strategy. And then in the summer, my boss, Mark, that's another key thing, right? You got to have great leadership around you that sees your potential as well and supports you in those moments when you're like, I don't know if I can do this. He tapped me and said, hey, I know you're concerned about product every single day, but I'd love for you to wake up and be concerned about everything in the business. And you kind of are in product in general, but that even took a moment for me to be like, okay, is this an interesting thing? Well, every single time someone said, hey, why don't you go explore that? It's never been a bad thing. It's always been a learning experience. And so I dove right in. And the
So it
benefit of
sounds
that
like mentors have been important then. It sounds like you've had some mentors that you've worked with and listened to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great women mentors for sure. The ones that you can bring back a job offer and say, hey, can you tear this down with me and help me put my bullets together so I can come back with a counter? I've had great leaders that have also become mentors after working for them to just kind of help me on my career path and my career trajectory. And then finding just folks that believe in, I call it the lowercase p potential, right? So people that see like there's the root of something or the seed of something, or if I give it a little bit of watering, a little bit of nurturing, it's going to grow. That's been a big part. So yeah, can't say enough about having good folks around you, for sure.
And it's so important to be able to pivot and find the U shape. That's a really good analogy. It really is. But pivoting all the time, especially in technology, because it's changing so much, right? So if we've put ourselves in one area, we're probably going to kind of flatten out. But if we continue to look for the pivot and the U shape, it allows us to jump, right?
Yeah, and find out what's new.
Yeah.
See what else is out there, what else is possible. Yeah. And I think the big benefit to reading as well, like just being that continuous kind of consumption of information, at least for me, I do a ton of reading every single month. It's a joke in my household that my pleasure reading is not nonfiction or is not fiction. It's nonfiction. Like, so it's like, what pleasure reading are you doing right now? And I pull out this big tome on like the psychology of planning and organizations, and people are like, that's not pleasure reading. I'm like, well, for me, it's just delightful.
That is an awesome superpower to have. It really is. I have to admit, I do read a lot of technical stuff, but it's usually not in books. I do like my historical fiction. I find it fascinating, especially around caste systems. And I think that that's an amazing topic that's starting to happen, and I'm so excited about it. But beyond that, you say things, you like to, what are you looking at now? So I realize that you've been in portfolio management, and did you get into portfolio management at CA?
Yep, via Rally, as we started to see agile practices change within organizations, it became clear that this was going to be something that wouldn't be contained within engineering, within product development. And so that sent us down the path of seeing how do you start doing this at some level of scale. And then obviously all the things that bloomed and blossomed around that. So, but that's where I got into it. Before moving out here to Colorado, I taught kindergarten and pre-K. I worked at a hedge fund during the height of the best time to work at a hedge fund in New York City, which was 2007 to 2010 almost. So it's been varied, but yeah, when I moved out here is when I got into tech solidly. I had always been interested, and then Rally is where I started to really embark upon what does it look like to do modern portfolio management, and that's been a passion of mine ever since, because so much of it is about human psychology.
So I want to talk about portfolio management and security. Is there a connection? And explain to us what it is.
So security in what way, Tracy? Because we could go probably a zillion different ways.
I would say software security and security within your portfolio.
Yeah. It's interesting. In a past life, I had some security products, and then also at GitLab, a big component of securing your code before deployment was doing scans, and everything was a big part of what we focused our customers on. For me, the ability to have the faith that you're deploying code that has no secrets, that people can't be able to exploit, is a huge value add. I'm a self-proclaimed SaaS hole, so I'm like all in on the cloud. Like it's where the future is. And part of the resistance there, right, is that people are always like, oh, it's not secure. Oh, I don't know. Oh, this, oh, that, oh, the other. And I'm coming from environments where I know that the security that we were providing, both from an infrastructure standpoint and then even from a deployment standpoint, was so high because we had to provide that traceability. We had to do those audits. We had to get inspected all the time. I had such a high level of faith in what we were giving our customers and what we continue to give our customers at Tempo. But for me, it runs all the way back to, in a business, if you're managing a portfolio, let's say you're Rockstar Video Games, one of the things that's really key is that people can't hack into your games. Because the moment they hack into it, you're actually losing your ability to generate revenue. We could probably debate whether or not microtransactions should or should not be a thing. But, every single transaction that happens, every person who buys the game, who gets committed to playing the game, who plays the game in the way that it was intended to play, those are folks that are going to come back. They're going to be repeat customers. And so for me, it runs the gamut of those small things that we think about just in terms of how are we doing and managing our code, all the way through to whether or not the products that we're putting out to market are of the high security that we expect. And especially for me being really kind of embracing cloud native in the traditional way that we define it, that's been just part of my existence in developing software. So important across all facets for me, Tracy, from each line, from scanning all the way through to deploy and post.
So I have this general belief that chaos engineering, which really focused in on SREs and the ability to bring a system back up after it's been some bad thing happened, right?
Yep.
Can be applied beyond just production support. And the more that I'm involved in the open source security world and just supply chain security for software in enterprises, what we consume, the packages that we consume that we don't know about it, the more I feel that we are at a place that we can't code scan our way out of this problem. I really don't believe we can test our way out of the problem either. Which brings me to threat models, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Because I believe that if we have the right data, if we have the data, then we can start doing accurate predictions. And now in the DevOps world, unlike other industries, we don't have a lot of centralized data. That's one of my passionate things. Because if we did machine learning and even potentially generating pipelines and pushing them out with a pull request, so teams can say, "Oh, there is a better pipeline. We should look at it and see if we should use it." Right? I think that's a better way to go. Mm-hmm. I see anything in portfolio management that is similar, and is there a direction for portfolio management to start using AI and machine learning and generative AI?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I like the chaos alignment too as well, right? It's all the tools that we can use at our disposal to make everything better. In portfolio management specifically, and I like that we're just calling it portfolio management. We haven't given a qualifier, which right now it's in the space is in a little bit of a shift. One of the things that for me has been a long time kind of frustration is I'm one of those folks where if someone said, "Hey, we're going to give you an embeddable chip. We want you to beta test it. The benefit of it is that you don't need to carry around your wallet ever again. And I can just walk through the airport and people can scan me." I'd do it. Right. And so I think for me, when the promise of big data emerged, and I call it the promise because it was like for a few years, it was just big data, big data, big data. Like you're going to have data-driven decision making in your organization. All choices will be the right choices. And then you add the human psychology component in there and it kind of mucks the whole thing up. But with portfolio management, one of the things that I feel we're on the cusp of, and is something that we're exploring here at Tempo, is we have similar amounts of data on how organizations choose, select, structure the way that they want to align their product portfolios, how those product portfolios then get decomped into the actual tactical work that happens, who's aligned to that work, how long it takes. When we start to see things veer a little bit off course, what are the different components that have actually led to that challenge that we might see? So one of the hopes that I have, and we're something that we're doggedly pursuing at Tempo, is can we observe just the natural network effect inside of an organization? Pull a lot of that data that we already have, historical stuff, move beyond just regression analysis with it, and actually start to build predictive models that tell people, hey, things are starting to go off track. We've seen this pattern before. Here's a way, or 3 different other ways that you might be able to get out of this particular path that you're on. And here's the impact to the overarching strategy. It's up to you to have a discussion about whether or not this shift in the window of opportunity or the change to the strategy is tolerable. but we're not going to make you do the work about thinking about how the work's going to get done, because we already know enough information to give you that first starting point. I feel like a lot of our lives are focused on what I've called for a while now, like work about the work, right? Like, let's get together and let's plan and let's plan and plan and plan and plan. Even though planning is a continuous activity, there's enough sense information, sense data that we have, enough coincidental indicators to tell us whether or not we're on similar tracks and paths. And what we know just from longitudinal psychological data and organizational planning is that orgs tend to follow similar paths over and over again. It's kind of pushing them out of that path to look at a different potential opportunity that tends to be a challenge. That's where I see AI and really good models being able to help portfolio management make better decisions about what it is you want to put inside of your plan so that you can hit those windows of opportunity.
And, every tool, we get, as a smaller company, we always get people, I get people all the time, emailing me, potential investors and whatnot. And they always ask, are you an AI company? And I don't even respond, honestly. It's because if we're, that'd be like asking somebody, back in the, I guess would have been the early 90s, is, do you use DB2? You have a relational database.
Yep.
Because AI is just another technology that we all can benefit from. Every single software project in the world can look at their new relationship with data.
Yes.
Now, some industries are really pushing it. Legal's a perfect example because there's so much already data online. Medical, which I know that you have some interest in. So what do you think are some of the industries who have really started really benefiting from the new technology that we can now put into software that we call artificial intelligence, which, by the way, has been around for quite some time.
A while.
For years and years and years.
It's like when mRNA came out, and people were like, this is brand new. And it's like, no, it's been under investigation for decades upon decades, right? These really new, innovative things take so much time to build. You touched, Tracy, on the medical side. That's something that's really important to me. And I think it's one of the areas that we're already seeing some really good traction. And it's not that the human ability to recognize patterns, to see that something is occurring or to see that something's happening is not great. It's just like, I think of, our context that we're moving into as like, what's it like to have a helper who can kind of double check my assumptions and then also provide that third party perspective that you oftentimes don't get. So you're seeing things, with like doing scans where, because we've got good models built up around certain things, certain minutiae that might be seen around tumors, that we're able then to make better and more accurate diagnoses. That's something that's really exciting to me. Another area that I'm really passionate about personally around everybody that might be making a visit to the doctor because they've got some strange thing occurring in their body. And then all of a sudden it turns out they've got maybe an autoimmune disease. And the realities of that look like people going 15, sometimes 20 years to get a diagnosis for something. And I really believe that there's going to be this power of bringing together sets of data from the crowd that help us find patterns that are repeatable across people that help to get us to diagnosis a lot faster. And that saves, not just people's time, health, their quality of life, but it also has in the long term a pretty good savings from just, healthcare and all of those expenses. So I'm really excited about the medical applications of AI, in addition to the portfolio-based ones that fill my work life. But in my free time, being able to get somebody to a lupus diagnosis in half the time, or maybe in 2 months, because we've got repeatable data that we can pull on. We see different patterns across the network of impact that folks have, is something that I believe we're going to see and we're going to achieve. And we're on the path to it because there's a lot of folks doing very interesting work in this particular area.
Well, it also seems like the way that different providers are blending care together. Like Kaiser always did this, right? You went to your Kaiser doctor. When my parents did that when they were alive, and all their doctors had access to everything.
Yeah.
Everybody used to make fun of Kaiser, like, oh, Kaiser. But the idea that no matter what doctor we took them in their old age, they could see their whole chart And you're seeing that more and more where your providers are interacting and everything's in one place. And I would imagine that is a critical thing to apply the AI. You need all that data in one place. You need your regular doctor, and maybe you have to go get a colonoscopy and your mammogram, but all that information is in one place. And then they can apply things that see those patterns, right?
Yeah, I think there you start to then get the possibilities of having the crowd of data that comes in. So right now, I've been talking about just like how do we get people to a diagnosis faster. But if you're inputting also the things that are helping you feel better on a regular basis, we might have better paths towards treatment in addition to medicines, especially since, anything that has to do with the body is a holistic thing, even though we like to think about it in terms of its little components. So there's a lot of hope that I have in that particular area that it will lead to better treatments, better programs, better palliative care for folks. And I think that's the part that gets me excited about AI, not the part that's kind of gloom and doom, where it's just like, oh, the bots are coming to take our jobs. It's like, well,
I am the same way. I look at the technology and the excitement of the technology side. And, there's something that Jody said. Electronic health records has been an issue for quite some time in the US because of the security and the privacy issues. But it hasn't been in India. India has had the electronic health records for quite some time, and they are already starting to do quite a bit of work in this area because they have a bigger pool of data.
Wow.
Now, unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily benefit people in the United States because people in India have a lot. Culturally, there's a lot of difference. Physically, there's a lot of difference. So AI has a regional a regional problem, right? Even, sometimes when sometimes I'll cheat and I'll want to submit something, a talk, and I'll use ChatGPT to get me started. And I often think, this is a US perspective, right?
Yep.
And it might even be a male perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
But having the ability I think that the reason why electronic health records was important in India was because they had 1 billion people to serve.
Right.
They had to have something cohesive, right? They had to. And even though we have a lot of great doctors in the US and everybody comes from good intent, when you go in to see a doctor, they only have 15 minutes to spend with you.
Right. And they spend so much of their time just entering the information too. Like
my eyes were swelling up not too long ago. And so I went in, I was like, what's wrong with my eyes? And they gave me prednisone, they gave me Benadryl, they told me I was allergic to something. And it never stopped until I started looking at myself. Mm-hmm. And I actually asked ChatGPT, what is the main cause of eye swelling? And what did it say? Dehydration.
Oh my goodness.
And I had just come off of a really bad cold where I was taking a lot of stuff to dry me out, like Mucinex and everything I could think of. And I got severely dehydrated, but they couldn't figure that out in the 15 minutes, right? Because the records were not there.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, Tracy, you're hitting on something that I hope for and is a core belief that I have around, we'll just say the big AI umbrella is kind of having that, the co-pilot with you. I mean, literally too, not figuratively, but just literally, right? Co-pilot in GitHub's pretty interesting technology that they've introduced. So that in that particular scenario, the doctors oftentimes are thinking about which codes do I need to enter, just the way that a program manager or program director at a large bank is thinking about, oh, do I have enough humans to get this work done? But if we can apply a little bit of logic to it via machine learning, via these models, and actually free up time to do the job that we are actually hired to do or the job that we want to do, that's my hope, right? So that we can spend less time in the busy work, right? And actually say like, oh, Tracy, you were sick for the last few weeks. How are you feeling right now? How's definitely increase the hydration here, not thinking about it. Like, is that code 221? I got to make sure I code this correctly or else we don't get paid, those sorts of things. That's my hope, at least. You can tell me
I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this, you guys. I was a professional athlete in my younger days, and my body has taken a beating. So I spend a lot of time at my orthopedic surgeon's office. And they have started using the whole office. They have an AI tool similar to Alexa Hopefully she won't bounce up here. She's in here with me. And when I go into my visits for my shoulder, my wrist, my ankle, and my knee, depending on the doctor, they tell you they're starting it. So the minute you walk in the office, the tool starts recording. The doctor doesn't take notes. Nobody, it's totally focused. And then when I get done, I get a transcript via email of the conversation so that if I forget some exercise he told me to do or some, maybe supplement he thought maybe would help me or whatever, I can go back and reference it. And so it's happening and it's really cool, but it's very small. But it's, to me, when they started a new office nearby and my first visit, I was like, this is crazy because their whole focus is on, and then they dictate right into the end, he dictates his notes, machine takes the dictation and then we're done. So it's pretty cool. And it would be really cool there's still places they're writing on paper, or they're not even using an iPad or a computer. It's crazy the differences. So it is
I think
to see that it's happening.
Dictation. Then the doctor could just talk to you and it could dictate the notes right immediately. That's brilliant.
That's what he does. And there's no attention. Like the whole conversation is recorded. So nothing gets missed. They can look at it later. Their PAs and their assistants will see it, goes in your chart. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Future's now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I want to know, this has come up a bunch, your psychology background. It sounds like you use it all the time. And I bet teaching, kindergartners probably helps too. To be perfectly honest. Some of these grown-ups we work with.
It comes in more handy than I thought. People are just like, I'll get a question. So do you use that anymore? I'm like, oh no, I don't use that anymore. But the psychology I use almost every day. And sometimes, you'll be in calls with people and you'll recognize that they've gotten triggered or something's occurring for them in their body.
So did you study it in college or where did you start with that?
Yeah, I got interested in brains. My mom had an aneurysm, a brain aneurysm, and had a major brain surgery. And interesting things started to happen after that. Like she had something called Gourmand syndrome for a little while, which is like an intense desire to cook really good food, which was awesome. It was really awesome. But also at the same time, you're sitting there and you're like, this is really strange. And so,
who are you and what have you done with my mother?
My mom, yeah. And so like that kind of kicked off this interest as a young kid around like what's going on up there. There's so much more that we don't understand. I think it was the first time where I had like an awareness that like, oh, there's this thing up here that controls way more than I think I know. And that set me down a path. I had always been really interested in early childhood development because the brain grows so quickly between the ages of, in utero all the way through to about 30. There's these big growth spurts. And I say about 30 because men tend to have a late stage big growth spurt, and those things become applicable. So, for example, I remember working with a company down in Texas, and they had given this gent right out of college, like he was fresh out of college, like this really big decision, like big responsibility. And, some of the older folks on the team were like, we don't know why he made this choice. And I was just like, well, that whole prefrontal functioning is not fully developed just yet. So he made the best decision he could with the developmental level and capacity that he had at the time. And so I think that helps a lot because you're just sitting there and you're like, okay, like we're fallible, we're going to make mistakes. We're at different stages, all of us. And having that play into how I think about even just, my job, because a lot of my job is trying to look into the crystal ball and figure out a good way path. And then also with portfolio management, a lot of times that's what we're trying to do is help organizations figure out the good path. And so much of our past experiences, our psychology actually plays in and factors into how we make choices. And then you throw 30 people in a room and you ask them to make a choice together and you've got all the social dynamics. But yeah, it started from my mom. She was the inspiration. And then I was really interested in our early childhood development. And I stopped honestly around 12, 13. So like really focusing on younger folks, because 12, 13 is when people learn manipulation. And like they get good at it. Like kids are pretty good at manipulation, but around the teen years is when like people get really good at it. Like, oh, it's consequences here and I can do this and that will be a different outcome. And honestly, I didn't have the patience.
Oh, it's definitely a spiritual gift, that, isn't it? Oh, that's
So,
crazy.
there was an article I read recently on the topic, and I think that there's been many articles on it, but the topic, and I'm going to go back to AI and how people trust AI. I read recently that robots people get more angry and blame robots faster than they would a human. So if a car has an accident, humans have accidents all the time, but if a car has an accident that was being self-driven, there's a lot of blame and a lot of focus on the technology. Why?
I don't think we've crossed over into full personification yet, right? So when we're talking to maybe Chat GPT, I would venture that most folks aren't saying like, "Hey, what's up? How are you? I've got this set of questions. Like, can you give me a first direction on how to potentially solve for this challenge that I'm running into when I'm writing code?" We're just like, "Oh, it's a machine. I'm going to treat it like a machine." And when we look at people, I mean, even one of the consequences of all of us working from home for so long and being in the little boxes was that we didn't have that person to person connection. Like there's actually something that happens when you see a physical person that you work with in flesh and blood. It creates more empathy for them. And I don't think we figured out how to create empathy with what we've been taught is a machine just yet. Although I may be on that category of people that says, "Hey, how are you? ChatGPT, I got a question for you today." But we haven't crossed that personification level. But we know it's possible because people name their cars. So it's just right around the corner.
Yes, they do. They do name their cars. But that kind of makes sense to me. You got to personify something before you have empathy. So yes, I get that. So you could be more empathetic to somebody who made the mistake that made you crash your car than you can if a robot made the same mistake and crashed your car. It's the same problem, the same mistake, but it's a human as opposed to a robot.
Yep, and we have the expectation, right, that these are completely infallible. I remember some of the initial legislation that came out, I think, in the EU was if you're using some sort of even predictive model. And this was way back, I think maybe 2012, 2013, around there. If you're using some sort of predictive model and that model has a negative outcome on a business, you could be held liable for the consequences of that. And so what that turned into was this resistance and this lack of trust. But I also think that elevates AI, big umbrella AI, into this level of status that it hasn't yet achieved, which is like it's taking the lead versus running alongside of us. And I still see it as running alongside of us currently.
I hope it stays running alongside of us. I'm more in the, oh my God, is it going to take over the world?
I want him to take over Congress.
I mean,
probably be a better job.
Exactly. I think AI would be really good just to run Congress right now.
I mean, back to how we started the conversation, right? With like equity and pay and everything. Like it does. Like there's no opinion there. I mean, although there are opinions in AI because of the way that's coded and biased, but that's humans, right? Humans are ascribing that opinion to it. And we can get to kind of opinionless world. I mean, the thing that I'd love to see, and I remember seeing this over the summer where people were like, "Oh man, I was really hoping that I would be able to make the art and that the AI would take the tedium of work." And I still kind of hold out hope, but that requires us to have a complete systemic review of society, and that's a people problem. That's not tech. That's people. But yeah, I'm hoping for the day where the bots are running the things that we don't want to do, so that we can actually spend time in community with each other. Because that's, I mean, like, hope that's what we're put on Earth for.
Well, and that's how we know it's not going to replace humans. Because we still need that human element. We need the supervision of humans. We need the element of being engaged in it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll take us over. I think we just need to keep it in its place and not let it become, abused, which we're seeing that happen in areas,
Yeah, in politics, it's going to get abused big time in politics. We're going to see it big time this year. It's unfortunate, but that's the case. So everybody has to be
we're all going to get a giant taste of AI abuse up until November.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Stay vigilant.
So Shannon, you are a bookworm, as you've self-professed that. Leave us with a book that we should read.
Absolutely. Great one, Trace.
All right.
I just finished a book, so I'm looking for one.
I've got one for you, Tracy.
Good.
And again, kind of keeping with the theme of I don't read particularly exciting books. So, but this one I find really wonderful. It's one I come back to all the time. I quote it. It gave me the song of the Mariner's Lament or something like that from an old play, which is go make yourself a plan and be a guiding light, then make yourself another plan, for neither will go right, which is life.
Words to live by, yeah.
Seriously, tell all of my product teams that I've worked with, like, hey, this is our guiding principle. We have one plan, then we make other plans, because there we are with the model of AI. Anyways, a great book, one that I love, one that I come back to quite regularly, is Dietrich Dorner's The Logic of Failure. And it's all about the human tendency to know a pattern that you've experienced over and over and over again, and how hard it is to take new information in and change your pattern based off of that new information. So it's full of great examples. I mean, going all the way back to Chernobyl, that's how the book starts. And you can imagine you're watching the Chernobyl miniseries and me pulling that book out and sitting down with my partner and being like, it was even worse than what we're seeing here. Like they had so many different points of information that were coming in that were telling them that something was off track, but they had a historical pattern of knowing this kind of flaky test that was occurring. Essentially, they're like, oh, it's just the flaky test. And Dorner provides tons and tons of examples like that. And the thing that I love about that book in particular, aside from it's just full of wonderful quotes that you can throw at people when they're exhibiting behaviors that are antithetical to good patterns moving forward. But the thing that I love about it is he gives you also some tips about how to work outside of that, how to get out of that pattern, how to trick yourself into thinking a little bit differently. And he really focuses on, and for me as an agilist through and through, making sure that all of the ritualistic ceremonies that you have as part of your life or part of your business world, that they're not there just to kind of keep you sedate, that they're there actually to find triggers and signals to make different decisions. And once you kind of grasp that part of the book, it's just like, okay, like nothing is actually as it seems. And we should always be asking the question of what data here is telling us to move in a different direction.
Well, maybe it'll help me stay on my diet.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing read. Thank you so much for that. Well, you know what? That's a great stopping point for us here today. Shannon, we just really appreciate having you. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Tracy, as always, my partner in crime. It's always good to see your face. Everybody, just tune in to Tech.Strong TV, and we'll have another episode of Tech.Strong Women up for you soon. Thanks so much for being with us today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.